Hello, my name is Kayla Larkin, and I am a librarian at Boston University's Alumni Medical Library. Today I will be providing an overview of some research tools and strategies that we in the library believe are particularly useful for our medical students. I'm going to focus on 3 databases today that you definitely want to check out if you're doing a research project and you want to conduct something like a really comprehensive literature review. The first one I'm going to talk about is PubMed, which you have all probably encountered in some form or another at this point in your academic careers, but I'm going to be showing off some advanced search strategies that might be new to you. I'm also going to be talking about 2 other databases called Embase and Web of Science, and I'm going to show you how you can best search these databases for scholarly journal literature. Finally, I'm going to discuss how you can get up and running with citation management software, focusing on a particular program called Zotero. So let's get started. So the first database we're going to talk about is PubMed, and PubMed, as you probably know, is the premier database for finding literature on life sciences and biomedical topics. And we in the library would definitely encourage you guys to access PubMed by clicking the special link that is on the homepage of the Alumni Medical Library website. Because even though you can just Google PubMed and access it that way because it's a free resource provided by the National Library of Medicine, if you just Google it, you won't be recognized as a BU Library patron and you won't have access to all the free text articles that you would get as a BU Library patron. This special link on our homepage allows you to authenticate using your Kerberos ID and password, authenticate as a BU person, and get all those full text articles. And I'll show you more about that in a couple minutes. So on the homepage, as I said, under Find Articles, we have a list of quick links to a few commonly used databases, PubMed being chief among them. So let's click this PubMed link here. Okay, so after I click the link to PubMed, I'm being asked to log in with my Kerberos ID and password, which is the same login info that you use to check your BU email. And I'm going to click Login. And now here is the homepage for PubMed, and I'm all logged in as a BU Library patron. You can always double check that you're logged in as a BU Library patron. If you go up to the URL for PubMed and you see this easyproxy.bu.edu in the URL. If you were just to Google PubMed and access it that way without logging in, you wouldn't see this easyproxy.bu.edu part of the URL in there. So once we are all good to go, we can start our search. So as an example research topic for this tutorial, we thought we might kind of use one of the past medical student summer research program projects. There's one in 2016. The topic was contact sport exposure and head injury, a risk factor for homelessness. So if this project were assigned to me and I was doing something, a program like MSSRP, I might hop over to PubMed and just start my literature review looking for any papers available on the relationship between head injury and homelessness. So in this main search bar in the PubMed homepage, I might just, as a start, kind of do like a googly style search and think of any kind of terms that come to mind related to this topic. So as a start, I just might type in head injury, homelessness, and then click search just to see what I can find. Okay, so here's my results page, and I'm getting 59 articles back. And some of them look pretty good, particularly these 3 in the best match box up at the top. But as I kind of start to scan through and read some of the titles of these articles that are coming back in my results, I can see that some of them are not, the most relevant to my topic. And I may be wondering why these articles that are not so relevant are coming back when I type in as my search head injury homelessness. And the answer to that is revealed if we look inside this search details box over here in the right-hand column. So I just click this little arrow next to search details, and then I click see more. What this shows me is when I type in, as like a googly style search into PubMed, head injury homelessness, how PubMed translates this query and what it actually searches the database for, what terms it actually searches for. And so you can see that there's a lot going on here. It's searching for craniocerebral trauma, the MESH term, craniocerebral all fields, trauma all fields, head all fields, injury all fields, homeless persons, the MESH term, homelessness, persons, all fields. So there's a lot going on, but basically two main things are happening. One, PubMed is doing a lot of behind the scenes work. It's trying to match what I've typed in here into these things called MESH terms. So MESH stands for medical subject headings. And so these are the key terms that are tagged onto articles once they go into PubMed to kind of describe the main concepts that are covered in each articles. The other thing that's kind of happening behind the scenes when we do a googly style search like this is that PubMed is breaking up our search query into the individual words and then searching for them in all fields. Now, all fields for each citation for an individual article would include the title, author, abstract, where and when the article was published, any author's institutional affiliation. And so what basically PubMed is just trying to cast as wide a net as possible and catch any potentially relevant article. But when that happens, a lot of times you'll get sort of extraneous articles included in your search results. So for example, if my name was Kayla Injury instead of Kayla Larkin, and I wrote an article, that's going to turn up in your search results. If I'm a professor at Injury University, that's also going to come up in your search results, and that is not so helpful for you trying to complete your MSSRP project on head injuries and homelessness. And so what we can kind of do to sort of cut out the middleman, instead of sort of by doing a googly style search, forcing PubMed to kind of intuit what we want, do this behind the scenes work and do its best guess at finding the articles you want, what we can do instead is just cut out the middleman and search using these mesh terms directly, these keywords that are tagged onto the articles. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my results page by clicking the back button here. See my search results. And I'm just going to check to see if there's any articles here that are, at least semi-relevant. So I'm going to click on one of these in the best match box here. Head injury and mortality in the homeless. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to check and see what mesh terms, what key terms are tagged onto that article that may be relevant to my research project that I can kind of incorporate into my search. Okay, so here is the citation for an individual article in PubMed. So we have the title, author, abstract info, where and when the article was published. And then below the abstract, if we scroll a little bit, in this little box that says mesh terms, if I click this little plus sign here, I can see what key terms are tagged onto this article to describe the main ideas. Okay, so any article in PubMed will be tagged with 5, 15, 20 mesh terms, depending on, I guess, the complexity of the article. The ones with the stars next to them are called the mesh major terms. They're like the super main focus of the article. And so we can see here there's a few starred terms to include craniocerebral trauma and homeless persons. And so those are two mesh terms that are probably going to be of interest to us given the topic of our research. If we're not totally sure if these are the right terms for us to incorporate in our search, what we can do is we can look them up in what's called the mesh dictionary. So the dictionary of all these key terms that kind of spell out exactly what PubMed means when they tag articles with these terms. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on one of these mesh terms. I'm going to click on homeless persons here. When I click on it, I have a couple different options. One, the first in this dropdown is search in PubMed. If I click that, what that does is it gives me a list of all the articles in PubMed that are tagged with this term homeless persons. If I go back to the previous page, check out those mesh terms again. If I click on the mesh term homeless persons again, instead of clicking search in PubMed, if I this time click search in mesh, What this does is it takes me out of PubMed and into the MESH dictionary, the dictionary of all the key terms. Okay, so here is this term, homeless persons, up at the top. So I'm going to click on that to see the entry for this MESH term. So this is the entry for the MESH term homeless persons in the MESH dictionary. So we have the name of the term up at the top. Below that is a scope note, which is kind of a definition for the term. So this is what PubMed means exactly when they tag articles with this term. So they mean persons who have no permanent residence. The concept excludes nomadic peoples. Below the definition or scope note, we have subheadings. So these subheadings are, specific facets of a topic that we can check off if we want articles on that specific facet of a topic. So if we're only interested in, say, articles about homeless persons as it pertains to legislation and jurisprudence, we could check off that subheading. If we were just interested in stats and numerical data, say, as it pertains to homeless people, we could check off that subheading. Below the subheadings, we have what's called entry terms. Entry terms are like synonymous words and phrases for the MESH term that you're currently looking at. And so as you are kind of formulating your research question, if a word or phrase that pops into your head to describe a particular concept appears in this list of entry terms for MESH term, that's a good indication that this is the right MESH term for you to use in your search to cover that concept in your research question. Finally, at the very bottom of this entry in the MESH dictionary, we have what's called the MESH tree, and where this particular MESH term falls in the MESH tree. So the MESH tree is sort of a hierarchy of all of these different MESH terms. So all these MESH terms are arranged in a hierarchy from broad concepts at the very top of the tree to narrower and narrower and narrower concepts as you work your way down the tree. And this is where homeless persons falls in this particular tree. So you can see that a broader term than homeless persons is just persons, and you can click on that term to see its entry in the MESH dictionary. And then any terms that fall below homeless persons in the MESH tree are more specific or narrow terms, for example, homeless youth. And you can click on that term to see its entry in the MESH dictionary. Just sort of checking out where your term falls in the MESH tree can help you figure out, again, if this is the right term for you to use in your search, if it's specific enough or broad enough to really capture the concept that you want to cover in your research. And so if you're specifically interested in homeless youth, you might want to use this term instead of homeless persons. Or if you're just interested in persons in general, say, instead of just homeless persons, you could just use the MESH term persons. But I just want to note that when you search for a term like homeless persons, you get any article in PubMed tagged with that term, but you also get any articles that are tagged with more specific or narrow terms that fall below that term in the MESH tree. So we'll get any articles tagged with homeless persons if we search for articles tagged with this term, but we'll also get any articles tagged with homeless youth. So you don't have to search for them separately if you're interested in all of these articles. So that's kind of handy. Okay, so if we do want to see all the articles in PubMed tagged with this term, homeless persons, what we need to do is go over here to the top right, click Add to Search Builder, and then search PubMed. And when we click Search PubMed, we're going to leave the MESH dictionary and see all the articles in PubMed that are tagged with the term homeless persons. So this is kind of the workflow we want to go through for each of the main concepts covered by our research question. We want to figure out what MESH term best sort of encompasses each concept. So for our particular question today, we want to find articles about head injuries and homelessness. And so we've already covered the first concept, homelessness, with this MESH term, homeless persons. Now we need to figure out what's the best MESH term to cover the concept of head injuries. So what we can do is we can go back to the MESH dictionary. So from this drop down up at the top near the search bar, I'm going to change from PubMed to MESH. And I'm going to look up head injury to see what's the best MESH term to cover that concept. And I'm going to click search. So here I'm back in the MESH dictionary. My top search result is cranial cerebral trauma, which is what was one of the mesh terms tagged onto that sort of initial article we looked at. So let's check that out by clicking the name of it here. So again, as with the homeless persons entry in the mesh dictionary, we have the same elements. We have the name of the term, we have the scope note or definition. Below that, we have some subheadings that we could apply to a search if we wanted to research a particular facet of this topic. Below that are entry terms. So these, again, are synonymous words and phrases for the term that we're looking at. And we see here in this list of entry terms is the phrase head injuries, which was how we sort of formulated the concept when we originally devised our research questions. So this is, again, a good indicator that craniocerebral trauma is maybe the best mesh term we can use to cover this concept in our search. And finally, underneath this long list of entry terms, we have where this term, craniocerebral trauma, falls in the hierarchy of other mesh terms in the mesh tree. Again, any term above craniocerebral trauma in the mesh tree is a more broad term. Any term below it is a more narrow or specific term. And again, if anytime I search for articles tagged with craniocerebral trauma in PubMed, I get any articles tagged with that term, but also any articles tagged with terms that fall below this term in the hierarchy. So I also get any articles tagged with, say, shaken baby syndrome, or head injuries closed, or head injuries penetrating, etc. So I don't have to search for all of these different terms separately. If I search for craniocerebral trauma, I've got it covered. I'll get all these articles. Okay, so again, to search for articles tagged with this term in PubMed, I click Add to Search Builder and search PubMed. Okay, so here are all of our articles tagged with the term craniocerebral trauma. Okay, so now we found the mesh terms for the two main concepts in our research question, homelessness and head injuries. But we don't just want all of the head injury articles separate from all of the homelessness articles. Ideally, we want all of the articles in PubMed that are tagged with both of those terms, homeless persons and craniocerebral trauma. So how do we do that? So what we need to do is go to the advanced search page to combine the last two searches we did in PubMed into one big search. So I'm going to click Advanced, which is this little subtle button underneath the search bar here. And when I do that, that's going to give me my search history in PubMed for about the past 8 hours, right here under History. And that's really handy. So I can get up, get a cup of coffee, come back. My search history is still there. I can, dive right back into my research. If you want to save your search history in PubMed for longer than, say, 8 hours, all you need to do is sign up for a My NCBI account. And when you do that, you can save your searches in PubMed for months on end. You can also set up automated search alerts so you can get notified anytime a new article comes into PubMed matching certain parameters that you've set. There's a lot of benefit to doing that, so I would definitely encourage you to do so. Okay, so back to the task at hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click Add next to each of my last two searches. So I'm going to click Add next to my search for articles in PubMed tagged with homeless persons, the mesh term. And I'm going to click Add next to my search for articles in PubMed tagged with craniocerebral trauma, the mesh term. And you can see when I click Add, they're both hopping up here to my search builder. And so kind of to explain what this is doing, it's telling PubMed I want any articles tagged with both of these terms, homeless persons and craniocerebral trauma. It's like the center of the Venn diagram of these two search terms. Okay, so now I'm going to click Search. And I get 44 articles back. And so again, these are all the articles in PubMed that are tagged with both of these mesh terms, which we can verify if we just check out one of these articles that's coming back here. So let's check out this one, Childhood Trauma and Lifetime Traumatic Brain Injury Among Individuals Who Are Homeless. I'm going to click that title to check out the citation for this individual article in PubMed. Okay, so we have the title, author, abstract info, where and when the article was published. And then below the abstract, we have the mesh terms. So if I click I can expand that box and see what mesh terms are tagged onto this article. And so again, the starred terms are like, the super main focus. There's a variety of mesh terms here, including homeless persons, which we searched for explicitly. But I don't see craniocerebral trauma. What I see instead is brain injuries, traumatic. And you're like, why is that coming up? Well, let's click on the entry for this term in the mesh dictionary just to check out what it's all about. So if we scroll down, we can see where this term falls in the mesh tree, the hierarchy of other terms, and we can see that it falls below the term that we searched for, craniocerebral trauma, in the mesh tree. And so, as I mentioned, when you search for this term, craniocerebral trauma, you'll get any more specific terms that fall below it, including brain injuries, traumatic. So that's how that worked, and that's why this article appeared in our search results. One last thing I wanted to note here, this element of this article citation, up in the top right-hand corner, we see the links to the full text. And so that is why we went through all of the trouble of clicking the link to PubMed on the library website and logging in as BU people so we could get the links to the full text articles in PubMed. There are a small selection of full text articles in PubMed available to everybody for free, but many of the articles you would not be able to read the full text for unless you're logged in as a BU person. All right, so let's just go back to our search results for one sec. So 44 articles is like a pretty manageable number of articles to kind of scan through, check out the title, abstract for, see if it's pertinent to your research topic. But say you wanted to kind of limit your search results further still, what you could do is you could apply any of the filters over here in the left-hand column. So PubMed does a kind of annoying thing in that it only shows you a few of the available filters by default. You actually had to click Show Additional Filters to just see all the filters that are available to you. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click Show Additional Filters. And I'm just going to check off all the filters, languages, sex, subjects, etc. And then click Show. And so when I do this, it just shows me all the filters I can use. It doesn't apply any yet. To actually apply them, I had to click again. So let's say I wanted to just see the articles that match these search parameters published in the last 5 years. I could go under publication dates and click the 5 years filter. I can also limit my search results to a particular age group, sex, or language. And that's how you would limit down your set of articles further still. And if you see any articles that you like, again, you can just click on the title to see the abstract and other information for that article. It might be helpful for you to check out what mesh terms are tagged onto an article if you like it, to see if there's any terms that didn't occur to you initially that are relevant to your research topic that you might want to incorporate in your search. So for example, if you're interested in cohort studies, you could grab that mesh term and add it into your search string up here in a new search. Another place to look when you find an article that you like, in addition to checking out the full text, linking it to the publisher's websites by clicking one of the links in the top right, assuming that it's available for free or through BU's library subscriptions. Another place you want to look is in the Similar Articles tab. And so that's over here in the right-hand column. And so these are kind of PubMed's best guess on, like, if you like this article, what else might you like to read? It shows you about 5 by default, but if you click See All, this little button here underneath those 5, usually you can see a whole bunch more articles that you can check out. Okay, and so that's kind of the basics of conducting an advanced search in PubMed using mesh terms. So the second database that we're going to talk about today is called Embase. And a lot of times Embase is referred to as European PubMed. So again, it's a database whose focus is biomedical journal literature, but it covers a different set of journals than PubMed does. There is some overlap, but a lot of times Embase is going to cover smaller European journals, Australian and Japanese journals that are not covered by PubMed at all, in addition to the big guys like JAMA and Lancet and stuff like that. So let's go check out the database. So to access Embase, again, we're going to want to go to the library homepage and click the link to Embase under Find Articles, just like we did for PubMed. Unlike PubMed, Embase is a completely subscription resource, so you won't be able to access it by just Googling it. So you're definitely going to want to click this link. And after you do, you may be asked to log in as a BU person if you have not done so recently on your computer. But since we just logged in for PubMed, my Chrome remembered me, so we didn't have to do that. So here we are on the main page for Embase. There's a lot going on. But what I want to show you first is the M tree here. So I'm going to click M tree. So just like in PubMed, articles in Embase are tagged with key terms to describe the main concepts covered in each article. Instead of being called mesh terms, these key terms are called M-tree terms. And we can search using these M-tree terms directly, just like we would search using mesh terms in PubMed. So let's continue on with the same sort of research question we've been talking about, head injuries as they relate to homelessness. And so just like in PubMed, we want to think about what key terms best cover each of those two concepts. So let's think about homelessness first. I'm going to type in homelessness. And as I'm typing, you can see that a little drop down with an orange bullseye is popping up that says homelessness and then 10,622. So what Embase is attempting to do is to match me as I'm typing with the correct or closest, most appropriate M-tree term based on what I'm typing into the search box. So we have homelessness as a term, and what's telling me is that over 10,000 articles in Embase are tagged with that term. So that's really handy for me to know. But I'm going to click on this term just to make sure it's the most perfect one for me to use for the concept of my research question of interest. And so what we see, it looks kind of familiar to the mesh dictionary entries we talked about. Just like in PubMed, the key terms are arranged in a hierarchy from broad concepts at the top of the tree to narrower and narrower and narrower concepts as you work your way down the tree. Anything above homelessness in this tree is a more broad concept. Anything below it would be a more narrow concept. In this case, there are no narrow concepts that fall below this term in the hierarchy. It's the most specific you can get. And then just some sort of additional information when articles began being tagged with this term in Embase, and some synonymous words and phrases here. So if I want to search for all of the articles in the database Embase tagged with this term homelessness, I can click Add Query Builder and search. And when I do that, it will bring me a list of all the articles tagged with that term. And as promised, there are 10,622. And so similar workflow as we saw in PubMed, we want to think about what's the best M-tree term to cover each of our two concepts. So our second concept would be head injuries. So we can go back to the M-tree dictionary by clicking M-tree here next to search. And this time I'm going to look up head injury. Great. And so I see that there is a term head injury here, and over 300,000 articles are tagged with that term. We might recall that in PubMed, the best term for us to use is actually craniocerebral trauma. If we start typing that in, we're like, what happened to that term? Here we go. It says craniocerebral injury, use head injury. Okay, so again, that's kind of verifying for us that this is probably the best term for us to use in this database, Embase, to get at this concept. Okay, so if we check out the entry for this term in Embase, again, we have where this term falls in the hierarchy of other terms, broader above it, narrower below it. Then some synonymous words and phrases. To search for all the articles in Embase tagged with this term, I can click Add to Query Builder and search. And so here are all of my 300,000 head injury tagged articles. If I instead, and more helpfully, want all of the articles that are tagged with both homelessness and head injury, all I need to do is go up to my history box above my results, check off each of my last two searches, and then click Combine using AND. When I do that, what I'm searching for is any articles tagged with search number 1 and 2. So any articles tagged with both the entry term homelessness and head injury. There are 127, and they're all listed here. If I want to narrow down these search results and perhaps make them a little more relevant to my research, I can use any of these filters over here in the left-hand column. This sources filter is kind of interesting. Let's click the little down arrow to check that out. What we're presented with is like a Venn diagram, right? And so what this is telling me is that out of all my search results, out of all of my 127 search results, how many are in Embase versus Embase and Medline. So Medline's like another way of saying PubMed. So it's telling me that out of these results, 49 of them are just in Embase, not in PubMed at all. And that's kind of useful information for me to have. And it kind of speaks to why we want to search more than one database when we want to conduct a comprehensive review of the literature. So as I kind of talked about at the top, we are going to talk about 3 major databases here that are frequently used by medical students and medical researchers more broadly. And that's kind of a best practice, like a rule of thumb, to search 3 or more databases when you want to conduct a comprehensive literature review. And the reason for this is because, as we can see here, although PubMed covers a lot of journals and a lot of articles, it does not cover every single journal and every single article. So when we sort of conduct a comparable search in both PubMed and another database like Embase, we can see that if we had only searched one or the other, if we had only searched PubMed per se, we would be potentially missing out on some relevant articles. And so we don't want to miss out on anything relevant. So that's why we search more than one, to kind of hedge your bets and cover our bases. Okay, so if I wanted to just look at these Embase articles, I can just select that little hunk of the Venn diagram and click apply. So I'll just see those 49 articles. There are some additional filters that I can apply here if I wanted to. Age, similar to ones that we saw in PubMed. Gender, study types, publication types. This is kind of interesting. And so what this is telling me that in addition to journal articles, I'm also getting some other sorts of information sources through Embase, including conference abstracts. So that's kind of verging on what we call in the library biz, gray literature. So gray literature, sort of broadly speaking, can be thought of anything besides basically a scholarly journal article or like a book. So that includes conference abstracts, news articles, data sets, posters, blog posts. All of that stuff is considered gray literature, and none of it is in PubMed. Some of these other databases that we're going to talk about today, Embase and Web of Science, each include some gray literature in addition to scholarly journal articles. And a lot of times, depending on what your topic is, gray literature is going to be really crucial for you conducting a comprehensive lit review. If you're doing a really cutting edge topic, as we know, peer review is a process that takes a long time, sometimes multiple years. And so the best information on your topic may not have made its way sort of down the scholarly journal pipeline yet as a published journal article. And so the best source of information sometimes might be something like a conference abstract or a poster or something like that. So that's something important to keep in mind. And again, that's why it's useful to check more than one databases, particularly looking beyond PubMed. So if we see any articles here that we like, that look like a good fit for our topic, we could check out this one here, Aggression and Victimization Among Homeless Persons with a History of Traumatic Brain Injury. We'll click on the title to see the citation for this individual article in Embase. So here we have some sort of familiar information. We have the title, author, abstract information, where and when the article was published, and then below that, below the abstract, we have all the key terms or entry terms that are tagged onto this article. Here we have homelessness and then traumatic brain injury. Likely that is one of the terms that fell below the entry term head injury in the hierarchy of other entry terms, and that's why it's appearing in our results set. If we want to read the full article, we'll just click this full text link in the top right corner of the entry for this article in Embase to link out to the publisher's website. And that is sort of the basics of searching in Embase. So the last database I'm going to talk about today is called Web of Science. And so it's the last of three, and I mentioned earlier how a rule of thumb is to check 3 or more databases when you want to conduct a comprehensive review of literature. So far we've talked about PubMed and Embase, and the focus of both of those databases is really biomedical health topics. Web of Science covers that stuff, but in addition to that, it covers the arts, humanities, social sciences, engineering. It's got a whole lot of stuff. So you can really sort of supplement your research, really best cover your bases by searching Web of Science in addition to the other two to make sure you don't miss out on any potentially relevant articles. So as was the case with PubMed and Embase, you're going to want to access Web of Science by clicking the link right here on the library homepage between PubMed and Embase under Find Articles. Just like Embase, Web of Science is a subscription resource, so you will not be able to access it by Googling it. You'll have to go here to the library website and click the link. If you have not logged in with your Kerberos info recently in your web browser, you may be asked to sign in. But again, I'm remembered from my previous login with PubMed, so we're ready to go. So this is the home page for Web of Science. We're brought to the basic search page as a start, but most of the time we're going to want to be using this advanced search page instead. So I'm going to click Advanced Search. Using the advanced search features is going to give me a lot more control over the types of search results that are going to come back, and you're going to see that we will need that. Web of Science is kind of like an old school database, and you have to search it in kind of a different way than you would Embase or PubMed. Unlike Embase and PubMed, Web of Science articles are not tagged with key terms. So there's no mesh terms, no empty terms to help us out. So we have to be very deliberate about what we type into this search box. The other kind of funny thing we have to do is incorporate these things called field tags, and they're listed over here on the right. So we have TS as topic, TI as title, AU as author. And so we had to really spell out to Web of Science what we want to look for precisely. Most of the time we're going to be wanting to use this TS field tag. So I'm going to type TS equals. TS equals. It says TS means topic, but really what that means, not so much topic as, search all fields. So you're looking title, author, abstract, all of that to do a really comprehensive search. The other thing to note is that say I type in TS equals, and I'm going to put this in quotes, so it searches this exact phrase, head injury. Okay, and if I click search, what this does is it brings me to my search history, and I can see that there are 33,000 articles that match this query for head injury. I can click the number here to see those articles. But what I should note is these 33,000 articles are articles that include the phrase head injury. It doesn't include the words head injuries. It doesn't include articles with the phrase craniocerebral trauma or any other synonymous word or phrase. It searches for precisely what I have typed in, no variant spellings or word endings even. And so if I want to search for articles that include head injury or head injuries, I have to type that in explicitly like this, TS equals, and I'll put some parentheses in, head injury or head injuries. And I'll put some quotes around each of those phrases, head injury or head injuries, and close it with parentheses and click search. And again, I'll be brought down to my search history. You can see how the number of articles that are coming back jumps up significantly by several thousand when I include this variant, word ending, injuries. And so that's kind of unfortunately, the workflow you had to go through for Web of Science. You had to be very explicit about what you want to look for. What's handy, though, is you can incorporate these wildcards, these little asterisks, to stand in for one or more characters, and that will save you a little bit of typing. So alternatively, if I wanted to search for articles that include the phrase head injury or head injuries, I could type in head injure star or asterisk, and that will give me any articles that include those variant word endings. But it won't give me any articles that include synonymous words or phrases for head injury. So it won't give me articles that include cranial cerebral trauma, for example. So I'll have to type that in separately. So now I'm going to type in TS equals, item in parenthesis, head injuries, indicated by the asterisk, or I'll type in craniocerebral trauma, and then I'll put another asterisk, so I'll get trauma or traumas, any other sort of variant word ending there, and I'll click search. You can see now I have 38,000 articles that match these search parameters. And so basically, in a similar fashion as we kind of work through in Embase and PubMed, we want to develop a good search string for each of the main concepts in our research question. But instead of finding the right key terms to cover each of those concepts, we really want to think about all of the different ways those concepts could be described exactly in the literature. So what words precisely the author might be using in the title or abstract to describe that concept. And so if you were conducting a literature review, you might want to be even more exhaustive than this, using your expertise of the subject matter to think of any other synonymous words or phrases that could cover this concept, conceivably, of head injuries. But to save you some time and me some typing, let's move on to our second concept that's covered in our research question of homeless people, homelessness. So I'm going to type in TS equals, I'm going to type in homeless, and then asterisk, so that will get me homeless, homelessness, etc. And I'm going to click search. Okay, so now I have my 17,000 articles that include some variant of the word homelessness, homeless, etc. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine my last two searches, similar to what I did in Embase and in PubMed in my search history. So I'm going to check off each of my last two searches and combine using and. So basically this is what I'm telling Web of Science to do. I'm telling it to search for any articles that include one of my head injury related words, doesn't matter which one, and one of my homelessness related words, because I want articles that cover both of those concepts. So now I'm going to click combine. And you can see that's brought my number of results down to 19. I've combined searches 5 and 4. I'm going to click the 19 so I can see those articles. And this is our results page. Okay. And so say I liked one of these articles, I could click on the title. Let's see, I'll just click on this top one here. And I would get the title, author, abstract information. And I could read the full text by linking out and clicking the publisher's website. I'm going to go back to my search results for a second, though. I want to show you a couple other things on the results page. If I wanted to narrow down this set of results at all, I could use some of these filters over here on the left-hand column. So some similar sort of filters that we've seen in the other databases like Embase and PubMed, publication year, document type. And under document type, you can see that what's included here is some gray literature, similar to what we saw in Embase. So gray literature, again, anything basically that's not a book or a scholarly journal article, so stuff like posters, meeting abstracts, blog posts, whatever. Those things are not included in PubMed, but they are included in databases like Embase, and as we see here, Web of Science, right? Some other interesting filters, if we scroll down a little bit, if there's any particular funding agencies attached to an article, it's listed here. It's helpful for you to know in case someday down the line you might be looking for grants to fund research on a particular project, you might be interested to see what sort of organizations have funded research on that topic in the past, right? Finally, if you click view all options, you can see additional filters, including conference titles. So if there's a particular conference attached to a document that's coming up in your search results, there's none listed here. But if there were, there would be a list of conferences that are pertinent here. And that's also helpful for you to know in case you ever want to attend or present at a conference related to a particular topic. That's sort of helpful information. So let's check out another one of these articles, because I just want to show you a couple other sort of interesting features that are unique to Web of Science. So in addition to kind of the classic info that we saw in the other databases like title, author, abstract, we also get citation information for articles in Web of Science, including articles that are cited within the article. So basically like it's bibliography. That's if you scroll down underneath the abstract, you see cited references. So this is basically like the bibliography for the article. And this is info that's not in either Embase or PubMed. So it's kind of going back in time, right? If we want to go forward in time, if we want to see what articles have cited this article since it was published in 2017, we can click this little button in the top right that says time cited. So it's been cited one time since 2017. If we click that number, we can see what article has cited it. And that's kind of helpful for us to know, because say we find an article that we really love on our topic, but it was published like in 2004, and we're like, what more recent literature is out there related to this topic? We can see what articles have cited that article since it was published in 2004. Because if you're citing an article, you're probably writing an article on something that's at least semi-topically related, right? So let's go back to the results page for a second, because this is kind of helpful. So if we go back to our 19 search results, by default, these results are organized by date, as you can see here, from the most recent articles at the top, and then as you work your way down, less recent. So the most recent article here is September 2019, just a couple months ago. Instead of listing them by date, we also have the option to list them by time cited if we click this little button, time cited, and then we'll get the most cited articles up at the top. And that's kind of helpful, so we can see the top ones now. This one, the epidemiology of traumatic brain injury, cited 437 times since it was published in 2010. Second most cited article here, the effect of traumatic brain injury on the health of homeless people, cited 77 times since it was published in 2008. So let's check out this one, because this is like kind of on the money for our topic, right? And so if I want to see what articles, again, have cited this article since it was published in 2008, I can click this 77 to check out those articles and see if any are topically related to my subject, right? And a kind of a handy way to do that is to use this refine results filter here in the left-hand column along with the other filters. And so I can search within the titles and abstracts of these 75 articles here for a particular word or phrase. So let's see if I wanted to look up, I could see if any of these articles include the word or phrase homeless. And I can see 55 of those articles include the word homeless somewhere in the title or abstract, and I can kind of peruse these and see if I want to save any of these sources as they may be pertinent to my research question. Okay, and so that is kind of the gist of searching in Web of Science. So some challenges in that there are no key terms to kind of hold our hand and help us devise a search strategy. We have to be very deliberate and explicit about what we're looking for as we construct a search string. But added benefit is that Web of Science includes great literature sources and a lot more fields of research than does Embase or PubMed. And it also includes citation information, time cited, other articles cited within articles. And that is also information that is not included in either Embase or PubMed. So a great resource to supplement your search when conducting a comprehensive literature review. Okay, so once you're finished with your searches in databases like PubMed and Embase and Web of Science, once you find all of your research sources, all of the articles that you like, how do you collect them all into one place and organize them in a way that's helpful for you? And then when you begin to write up your paper, how can you cite them and create bibliographies quickly and effectively? Well, the answer is by using citation management software. You can use a program like Zotero, which we're going to talk about tonight. So there are a few different citation management software programs that you can use. The most popular ones on this campus are Zotero, which I'm going to talk about right now, Mendeley, and those are both free options. And then there's also one called EndNote, which is a paid resource. It's very good, but it costs a lot of money. So a lot of times students find that using either Zotero or Mendeley suits their purposes just fine, and they're both free, and that's great. Zotero is a little easier to demonstrate in a setting like this, so that's why I'm choosing to show you that one. But we in the library can support you with any questions you have with any three of those programs. So if you're new to citation management software, the first thing you gotta do is download it. So we're gonna go to the Zotero website, which is zotero.org. And what you're gonna wanna do after you reach that page is click download. And there's actually three different things that you need to download. And it says here, it's noticing that my computer is a Mac because that's the type of laptop I'm using, but you can also download Zotero for PCs. It's no problem. So the first thing you need to download to get started with Zotero is the desktop client, which is the program that lives on your computer. The second thing that you're going to want to download after you download the desktop client is what's called the Zotero connector, and that's a little bookmarklet that you can use for your browser of choice, whether it's Chrome or Firefox or Safari, to save any sorts of resources that you're viewing in the browser to your Zotero library. So if you're on PubMed and you want to save an article, you can just click the little icon that lives in Chrome to save it with just a simple click of a mouse. The third thing that you're going to want to download is any plugin for whatever word processor you might want to use. Whether it's Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or Drive or whatever. A lot of times, depending on the type of computer and the word processor you're using, once you download the desktop client for Zotero, it's going to recognize automatically that you've downloaded it once you open your word processor like Word, and so you won't actually have to necessarily download the plugin, but on the case-by-case basis, you might have to. So if you have any questions about that, you can just get in touch with the reference desk. So once you've downloaded all three of those, just want to show you what your Zotero library looks like. So this was the first thing we downloaded, the program that lives on your Mac or PC. So in our Zotero library, in the left-hand panel, what we have are a variety of different folders and subfolders because for each different project I work on, I like to create a separate folder to kind of keep my resources nice and organized and separated so I can easily look at what I'm looking for. To create a new collection, all you have to do is right-click in that library, anywhere in that left-hand pane, and you can click New Subcollection. Then you can name it something that's helpful for you. So let's say I'm writing a paper, kind of continuing on this head injury topic about sports-related head injuries. So I'm going to name it something like that, sports-related head injuries, and then we'll click OK, and that creates a blank folder for me in my library. Okay, so now that I've created that folder, now I can start saving sources to that subcollection in my library. So I'm going to open up Chrome again, because that's the browser I like to use, but you can use Chrome, Firefox, Safari, whatever you want. And I'm going to navigate to one of those resources that I want to save to my Zotero library. So here's a nice article I found in PubMed. I think we may have seen it in a results list earlier. So if I want to save this to that folder in my Zotero library, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little icon that looks like a sheet of paper that lives in the sort of menu bar of my browser. And when I click that, it's going to save it to my Zotero library, and it's going to default to saving it to the most recent folder I had open in my Zotero library, which is, of course, that one that I just created, sports-related head injuries. If you want to save it to a different folder, all you have to do is click the drop-down and select the folder that you want. It's also going to pull out any other sort of like addendum, any sort of other related resources that it can scrape from this page. If there happens to be a link to a PDF on this page, it will grab that and save that to your library. In most cases, though, you'll have to probably link out to the publisher's website to get that full text PDF for the reasons that we discussed previously when we were talking about PubMed. Okay, so this is what the citation looks like when it's saved to your Zotero library. So this is the information that it pulled from the PubMed citation. All the title, author, abstract information is listed here in this right-hand pane, and it's good to just kind of have a look-see right away after you save it. Make sure it pulled everything that you need in order to save this source properly. And so if you see any information that looks wacky or things that you need to add, you can just click in any of these fields and manually edit it. If it looks good, you can move on to your next information source that you want to save. So in addition to scholarly journal article citations, the likes of which you would find in PubMed, you can also save a wide variety of other information source types to your Zotero library, including books, like you might find on Amazon. So I've pulled up an Amazon page here for a book, Truth Doesn't Have a Side. So if I want to save that to my Zotero library, I can just click the icon for Zotero. But you've noticed that the icon has changed from a little sheet of paper to a book because Zotero, the connector, is really smart, and it's good at figuring out what type of resource type you're looking at in your web browser. It knows that since I'm on Amazon, I'm looking at a book now. And it's going to save the citation information that's appropriate for a book because, as you may know, in most citation styles, the citation information is different for every resource type. So the information used to cite a book is different from an article, is different from a podcast, etc. So this is very helpful, what Zotero Connector is doing by recognizing the resource type. Again, so if we want to take a look at what information has been saved for this resource in our Zotero library, we'll give it a little look-see, check out the information in the right-hand panel here. Make sure it all checks out. Edit it if it needs to be edited. If not, we can move on to another information source. Now we are on the New York Times, looking at an article related to head trauma. If I want to save this to my Zotero library, I can click the icon, which is changed again to a newspaper. Again, Zotero Connector very cleverly has noticed that the information source type has changed, and it is now going to save the citation information that is appropriate when citing a newspaper article, and it is saving it to our sports-related head injuries folder. We can check out the citation information that was pulled by looking in the library. If it checks out, everything looks good, we don't have to edit anything, we can move on. So now we are on just like kind of a website, right? And so if we want to save this website, Protect the Brain, we've noticed that the Zotero Connector icon has changed to kind of like a blue little sheet, which is just kind of its generic icon for a website. And when we cite websites, again, the citation information is going to be different than if we were to cite a newspaper article, a book, or a journal article. Zotero has the trickiest time pulling the appropriate information from websites. So this is the case, this is a particular case where you would want to be really vigilant about double checking the information pulled and making sure that things like the author or the organization responsible for the website is captured. But what's helpful is that for websites, Zotero actually takes a snapshot or like a picture of what the website looked like the day you saved it. And this is really helpful because, as we know, websites, unlike other sorts of information sources like books or journal articles, they're not static. So if we check out, this homepage for the website today versus a week from now, it may change drastically. And so if we just kind of save the URL for this website and 6 months from now we go to write a paper, we might go to that URL to kind of reference it and be like, why did we save this information source? And notice that the page has changed dramatically and we might not remember why we saved it in the first place. But that's okay because we'll have a snapshot backing up our citation, so we can reference that picture of the website, for this day in November 2019, and that will help us sort of cover our basis, and we can reference that image when we are writing our paper. And so that image is going to be saved in our Zotero library with any and all citation information that's pulled from the website. If we just click the little arrow for that source, we can look at that snapshot that was captured. And so this is the website, but it's not the actual website. It's a picture of the website and what it looked like today. And that again is saved to our Zotero library for us to reference for posterity. Okay, so once we are finished saving all of our information sources and we are ready to write our paper, we can open up our word processor of choice. Let's say it's Microsoft Word. So I'm going to open up Word. And again, depending on your type of computer, your type of word processor that you're using, you may have to download a Zotero plugin in order for your word processor to talk to your Zotero library properly and work together nicely. But in many cases, it will just do it automatically, which is awesome. Okay, so once everything's all set up, good to go, you can start writing your paper. This is my very, very good paper about sports-related head injuries. So I'm going to start writing. I'm going to write my first sentence. This is my first sentence. Okay, now I need to cite it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my Zotero tab. And just as a reminder, you want to have your Zotero library open somewhere in the background. You don't want to shut out of it. Just like minimize it or something. But keep it open. So click the Zotero tab and then click Add or Edit Citation. And then you're going to be prompted to choose a citation style. I'm going to go with APA 6. But there are 8,000 other styles for you to choose from in Zotero. Chances are, if there's a style you're looking for, it's probably going to be there. I'm going to click OK. And then I have a couple of options. If I know the name of the paper or the author, I can just start typing in this little Z box. Otherwise, I can click the Z and then select Classic View, and that will give me a little dialog box where I can see my Zotero library and select the source that I want to cite. So I'm going to go to my sports-related head injuries folder, select one of my sources, and then click OK. And now that is cited in line in APA 6. So I'm going to write my second sentence. I'm going to move on. My second and last sentence as it goes. I'm going to click Add Citation. I'm going to select Classic View by clicking the little Z, which will give me a little dialog box where I can select the appropriate source from my Zotero library. And now I'm going to click OK. All right, so now I'm done. I want to insert a bibliography. So I can click Add or Edit by Bibliography in my Zotero tab. And so that automatically generates a bibliography from all the sources cited in line in my paper, which is amazing. But let's say I turn this paper in and my professor's like, no, I don't want it cited in APA 6. I want it cited in like a different style. That's okay. You can just click Document Preferences and select whatever style your professor wants. So let's say they want you to cite it Chicago. They'll automatically change your inline citations and your bibliography from APA 6 to Chicago style. Very simple. You don't have to panic. Let's say we want to change it to something else. AMA, and we can see now it's updated the citation style to AMA. Okay, so let's say also my professor had some revisions for me and they're like, you got to ditch the second and last sentence. That's no good. So I'm going to delete it. And now I'm going to click refresh. So I want the change reflected in my bibliography. You can see that my bibliography is updated and it's removed that second citation from my bibliography because I don't have a sentence anymore. And that's it. So we covered a lot of ground today. We talked about 3 different databases. We talked about PubMed, Embase, Web of Science. We also did sort of a quick and dirty overview of citation management software, focusing on a program called Zotero. So that's a lot of information to absorb at once. So I wanted to make you aware of a few other resources on our library website that you can reference if you need a refresher on how to work with any of these tools. We have a list of tutorials on our website, a bunch of how-to videos about the databases we covered, in addition to many others, some citation management software programs in addition to Zotero, like EndNote and Mendeley. We also have a subject guides page, which is about 120 little guides, curated information source lists organized by research topic, whether it's pediatrics or obstetrics, that can really kind of get you up and running, figuring out what are the best sources for you to reference for your research project given the topic. Lastly, I just wanted to let you know that you are welcome and encouraged to reach out to any of us over at the library with any questions you have. If you need any assistance with your research, developing search strategies for, the various databases, if you're having trouble figuring out how to save sources to Zotero, whatever you need, please do reach out, give us a call, or email us. We monitor that voicemail box and that phone line Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we do check it all day during those hours, so you'll get a speedy response. You're also welcome to stop by in person at the reference desk, which is on the 12th floor front desk of the library, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So please don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for your attention. This is Kayla Larkin for the Alumni Medical Library signing off.